Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the EUphoria podcast, coming at you live from our AR studio. Digital masterpiece that this is. It's not actually AR, but...
When the first episode came out and I saw how it was like 2D us in the studio, I was laughing for at least 5 minutes straight. It looks so beeping cool.
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch it again.
Shout out to Phil, who's our producer, works with a company called More Than Visuals. He came in clutch on these green screen lights and the I don't know. I know what you call the effect in Photoshop. I don't know what you'd call it. Whatever the hell the tilty effect is to make us look weird. It's weird. If you think it's weird, don't worry. This is the last week of it, but Phil helped us make something special here so that us being from home would still feel a little bit like the studio environment.
Looks like we're stuck in a box. Dracos, help!
Bro.
I'm stuck on a screen.
Yeah, speaking, this is EUphoria Podcast, as always. Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you want to listen, we're probably there. If we're not, hit us up. We'll talk to the producers and see if we can get it uploaded there as well. But speaking of technical difficulties, we had a lot of fun this weekend on the remote cast. And the best part is, so people don't know this, but I was in the studio every day at every step of the way. But the way that the online setup works, it just always makes sense for me to connect on a PC the way Caedrel is to sync up our audio and make everything work. That's just the simplest and cleanest way for us to be able to cast in sync. Because if I were to cast on the desk where you see like Medi Vedi last weekend, there's a huge audio delay that doesn't work. But despite Caedrel being at home, and in theory, the most prone and most high risk to technical difficulties because there are no engineers in the area. It's like if anything goes wrong, he's kind of on his own. Someone has to remote into his PC. His German internet could go out at any moment. Despite all of that, me in the studio, surrounded by engineers and incredibly expensive technology, it's my shit that broke. And my man here, if you missed it, SK vs. Mad Lions, from 30 minutes onward, you can jump to the part where I sound like a robot and then disappear. We witnessed an iconic LEC moment in the Caedrel solo.
It was such a banger because apparently your microphone was roboted, but I couldn't hear it. Yeah. You were fine for me, absolutely fine. And then you just finish your sentence, and as you finish your sentence, I'm about to talk, and then Depa's in my ear saying, "Yeah, Dracos' mic is absolutely gone. You're gonna have to solo this." And I was like, "Okay, that's no problem. It's probably gonna be fixed in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. This game is they're sieging bot and hip. This game is over. This game is done in 5 minutes anyway." And then I'm casting for 2 minutes. I don't have a button that I can press. Normally when you're casting on the studio, you have a talk back button and you can hold it and talk to the producer and be like, "Hey, so is Dracos' mic fine?
Status update, what are we doing?"
Yeah, status update, what's happening? Give me some updates because I don't have that button at home. So I was just kind of yeah, I hope Dracos comes back soon. This game is great. And all of a sudden, an update comes in my ear after a few minutes and Depa's the producer's "Yeah, Dracos' mic, I think we're going to have it fixed in 2 minutes." I'm like, "Okay, 2 minutes. I've already done 5. I can do 2. And then after 2 minutes, after a massive fight, Depa's "Yeah, you're going to have to go to the end of the game." And I'm like, "Okay, surely." They just got Elder, second Elder. Surely it's going to end soon. They just got the 5th Baron. Now they got the 3rd Elder. And now they're fighting the 4th Elder. And I'm like, dude. And I saw a stat, and it was one of the longest games since 2018 spring. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, it had to be that one that you disconnect on.
Yeah. We started a new meme now. Anytime I say we're doing anything together, people tweet me immediately you mean Caedrel's doing it solo, right? You mean Caedrel's going
He's going to solo it. The co-streams are popping off. 200k co-stream on Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was.
Ooh, the Caedrel LEC co-stream. Resident co-streamer. Yeah, it was so funny too, because on my side, so I'm not going to tell you guys that this is the remote for everyone listening. The remote setup is perfect. I think it's we've gotten it to a good spot. And it's certainly better than we first had to start doing it. But obviously it's not ideal. And hopefully me and Caedrel can be back in studio this week and it'll all be fine. But the funny thing is the best solution for our audio not to be desynced is we hop in a Discord call separately. And I forgot that. So I'm muted in the main program that we use. We're using it for EUphoria now too. So I'm Caedrel can't hear me while I'm going test. But I forgot I'm still in the Discord call, and I'm just hard griefing you because you're trying to cast. I'm test. Is it fine?
Yes.
And
I remember.
Only 15 minutes into your solo cast did I realize that you could hear me the entire time while I'm over here What do you mean it's broken? What do you mean? Okay, so it's not a hardware thing. What is it? Oh, is it this thing? Okay, are we trying that thing? Maybe we could do that. And you're still kind of talking in your ear the entire time.
Yes, I heard you saying test every couple minutes. You're like test. And I thought you were doing this. I forgot about Discord too. I thought you were doing this on the broadcast to see if your mic was fixed.
No,
and I didn't realize that you were just doing it to me. Oh my god! So I didn't really like talk too much over it because I wanted to see like if the test cut your mic out and then you'd be like, oh, it works again, I'm back. But now I just realized you're just in my Discord call griefing me. Oh my god, no one can even hear it. No way. It was so frequent as well. Yeah, okay, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. So as a final recap, one shout out to you, obviously, Mark, and your heroic solo cast. I'm glad so many people liked it. On the engineering side, for those curious as to what actually happened, basically there's when you do remote stuff like this, there's a lot more points of failure. So it can be hardware or software on my end on the PC that I'm working on, and then every step of the way until it's actually broadcast out in studio, there can also be a failure. And you basically just have to go, unless it's really clear what the issue is, you have to go through and test every one. And sadly, it wasn't hardware on my side. It wasn't software on my side. So it wasn't like a restart the PC, it'll be fine. It ended up being something with our encoding process, I believe. I'm not an engineer, again. But so it was one of those things where it's just like, well, we're kind of screwed until we can get to a break screen. So good luck, Caedrel.
Yeah, but hopefully I'm in studio this weekend. Not 100%, but it looks like it might be likely. Though we won't have audio issues, and the boys will be back in town.
I'm so pumped, bro. You guys don't. We have like a huge pre-cast ritual. We listen to some hella gangster rap. It's pop a bunch of caffeine, get super hyped. It's a jam. So I'm. Oh yeah, and we listen to Bonfire.
You gotta feel it.
Oh yeah, we gotta listen to like old
Internet
dubstep.
Friends, Bonfire, Bonfire.
The nostalgia. You blocked me on Facebook, and now you're going.
You're going to die. Okay.
But to not get too far down the rabbit hole, this week we're going to be talking about a lot of things. We went on Twitter and asked you guys for a lot of your hot takes and opinions on this week, and you delivered 351 comments on this tweet. Thank you so much. We're going to hit on a lot of them.
Drake us on Twitter.
Yes, thank you. At Caedrel as well, if you have any additional ones. And at the end of this episode, we're also going to have a question that I want to ask to all the Euphoria viewers for the next week, just something I've been kicking around that we'll talk about in the next episode. But this week, we're going to talk about the biggest surprises in week one. We'll talk about your hot takes, and we'll talk about spring split MVP predictions, because a lot of these hot takes were actually predicting the MVP already, which I like, because we were going to talk about it last episode, and we ran out of time. Which is crazy because we went for almost 1 hour and 40 minutes last episode, which we got a little slap on the wrist for. We got to cool it down. So
we went a little bit too long.
But speaking of, we had technical difficulties. We had big, I kind of griefed you. And speaking of griefing, the biggest surprise in week one, to the surprise of no one, and we have a million hot takes on this. I'm not going to read any one in particular, and we'll get to some of the more niche ones later. But Vitality, we put them S tier. And what you guys don't know is that S is for suck. And we just didn't tell you what S meant. Is S meant suck?
And A means all right. B means below expectationally average. D
means definitely Astralis. Guys, we just didn't click. We didn't know.
C so means we obviously can win games,
can win games occasionally. No, our tier list ratings. We were wrong in this one. I think in the long run, I still have faith, but I think it's really important that we look at what actually happened this week in Vitality, because I think that both you and I, Mark, expected them to hit the ground running, and they hit the ground. But they
didn't get up.
It was more like 2 hits. One team hits and Vitality hits the floor, sort of thing. Sadly, it was a mess.
I rewatched a lot of their games yesterday. I found a lot of issues. So first of all, the first 2 games they played, I really didn't like the way that they were drafting. Mainly because I feel like they're overcomplicating things. It's early spring, and it's the start of a brand new season. People haven't scrimmed for very long. It's a brand new meta, new champions in the meta, new team. You need to find your footing, need to find what works for you. And if you look at a team like Rogue, who I'm sure we'll touch on later, they made it very simple. Picking Ore on top, Jinx, Victor, team fights only, core keys across the map. And they were playing too much to counter lanes. Like, they never really drafted their own comp. They're picking Kennen into Renekton, which is good matchup, right? You're countering the lane. But for the game, it didn't really work so much. Action and Yasuo, you'll get the push, you're counting the lane. Vex into LeBlanc, you should counter the matchup, you'll win the lane. Wukong into Jayce, right? They're picking the counter lanes rather than draft a comp, I felt like. And the comp never really came in together as harmony. Or like work so well together. You didn't have a clear win condition when you're playing like Akshan, Viego, Kennen, and you're up against a team comp that's just going to press R. You really need to play so well coordinated around where they are, what their cooldowns are, level 6 power spike, shutting them down, getting individual advantages, controlling side lanes, finding flanks. Like, there's so many things to juggle, and as good as these players are individually, which I still believe they are, it just feels really overcomplicated for an early spring split, early week 1, when it's a long year and there's still a lot to practice. So just right off the bat, team comps didn't like too much. By around day 3, I liked the Wukong, the Vex thing, because that did kind of make sense. But overall, I think there was also a lot of individual errors. Like Perks was picking Vex into LeBlanc against Nukeduck, taking Ignite, really struggling, forced back to his tier 2 early, had to get jungle to help him push out. Karsi and Labrov were getting 2v2 killed a lot. They were getting pushed in, losing matchups they shouldn't be losing. Didn't really feel like they were working as much as a team.
Yeah, and I think that it's sad for Vitality because it's good that it was so catastrophically bad that they can just kind of reset, I think, in a small way. And I know that sounds weird, but it's like it feels like pretty much across the board, everything that could go wrong went wrong, because you had individual underperformances. That Perks versus Nukeduck lane, like the only reason Perks didn't die like 4 times in that lane is because Nukeduck built freaking Leandries for some reason. He built Luden's Malzahar, and then he built Leandries LeBlanc, and I'm just
he's playing. I've seen this build before. The first time I saw this build was Larson was playing it in solo queue, and it's like a full CDR LeBlanc build, which has a lot of uptime but not a lot of burst. So I kind of get it. I kind of get the build, but of course, like a Luden's one shot is always good. Just your cooldowns are a lot longer, and if you play this build, it's like a in out, shake it all about kind of build,
I know, but like at the same time, bro, it's like, yeah, I get that your like mythic passive on your Luden's or on your Leandries is going to help you out, but like up until your like 3-4 items, just build the cooldown boost and get a Luden's Echo. You know what I mean? Like just kill. And this is not to shit on Nukeduck, because while Nukeduck was 0-0-0 for most of that game, he was winning that lane, and he was beating the hell out of Perks. And I think that like Perks looked uncharacteristically uncomfortable in that lane matchup. Every time I felt like we were going mid, it felt like he was getting out traded. He was missing some shots. And like, look, the Vex delayed Q, not easy to hit on a LeBlanc, certainly. But you do expect that matchup to be a little bit more close, a little bit more contentious. And it was super clear that Nukeduck knew exactly what he was doing in that matchup, and Perks looked pretty lost. And in the same vein...
also think...
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, okay, well, we got a little bit of delay here, so we're working through it, clearly. What I'll say is the other side of this that was difficult, too, is it wasn't just these individual mistakes or issues, because you highlighted the bot lane. I think EUphoria, while it did do good, was mostly set up, too, with counter picks. The execution errors were everywhere, and it was as bad as, like, the most highlight one is obviously people are going to look back at that Wonder Tower dive, but there were a lot of little moments where it felt like, if they played that a little bit cleaner, that would have looked like normal tower dive, normal team fight. But then there were just these small, I'm not sure if they were communication errors, I'm not sure if they were hand issues, but like Wonder living in that top lane in that game is as much a testament to how great Wonder is and how heads up of a play Wonder was making as it is how unorganized Vitality are. And like everyone going in at different times, super desynced. And Wonder did still have to play that flawlessly. I'm not trying to take away from Wonder, but I think there's a world where Vitality are 2% cleaner even, and Wonder at least goes down sooner.
True. I mean, credit to Wonder for that outplay. Just talking about that game, I do think that outplayed top dive, where they used a lot of gas top and didn't really get anything for it because they lost the 2-for-1 trade. It didn't really define the game too much. All it did was put the Gragas slightly ahead or even with the Renekton, so playing over sides became harder, where you want to, TF ult to the Renekton lane, kill the Gragas. He's just really tanky now, because I think the biggest problems they had this game was it was 18 minutes in, they had 4 towers to 1, and they had a 6k gold lead. So when you're playing a TF comp with a 6k gold lead, it's very easy to win the game. You just have to play over sides. But what ended up happening was the Brov got caught, and then they got caught mid, and then they overextended into their jungle. A couple of them died, and then they got caught mid again. So what happened from 18 to around 25 minutes, around 7 minutes of game time, I think they pushed out 1 side lane or 2 side lanes in 7 minutes, because what kept happening was someone kept getting caught mid, then they had to keep running mid to cover it, and by the time they know it, they're kind of even in the game, and they just lost Baron because their AD and support just got dove. So I really think they should have won this game. The other big problem they run into now that they threw their lead is their only AP damage is a Twisted Fate when you're up against champions like Gragas, who's building full armor. And, Perks, of course, is playing Everfrost Rapid Fire, right? So it's not a lot of AP damage. So you're playing TF Renekton, which are the 2 most banned champions in the Eastern region, and you're not closing out the game. As complicated as it is, a little bit complicated to play TF Renekton than it is, Corki Jinx. It still should be a win. So that's why I got a little bit worried for them when they were ahead. I think just really uncharacteristic mistakes from Carsey in that game and Labrov just getting caught a lot and then dying 2v2 the next day against XL. There's a lot of bad signs, which I think they'll recover from. But very uncharacteristic when you got the day 1, poor drafting.
Yeah.
Day 2, should have won, but misexecuted. Day 3, losing lanes individually. Alphari's TPs looked really off in day 3 as well because he was ahead on Wukong, but he could never really transition his lead because every time he TP'd, the fight was already over or it was they couldn't really find anything.
Yeah, overall, I'd say that this was super disappointing. If you're a Vitality fan and you're disappointed, I would say absolutely rightfully so. But I would also say let's see what happens in the weeks to come because I still think you have, on paper, a very strong roster, and you still had, despite what was ultimately a terrible week, some really good moments. And it feels weird because I feel like I'm just being a Vitality apologist at this point because it was a trash week. Don't get me wrong. I'm just like 3 games, first week. Let's see what they look like with a little bit more practice, maybe a little bit more of a wake-up call. Who knew? Maybe they were smashing scrims with all these compositions, and they never hit resistance like this. Like, even the best players sometimes need time. Maybe a hard pill to swallow when you watch the LCK last week and you see these brand new rosters just like instantly popping off at a super high level. But I still think it is the case that oftentimes even a perfect roster or paper perfect roster needs a little bit of time to adjust and figure its stuff out.
Yeah, maybe we set expectations too high. Maybe we're expecting them to just come out 3-0, instant super week, be the best team in the league next to Fnatic or something. That wasn't the case. I think it's definitely valued criticism to say, like, look, you guys were individually performing mid, bot, self-made didn't really find anything. TPs were not great, maybe it was just an off week. I'm sure they'll bounce back. I mean, you just have to look at the pedigree of the players. And if they don't, well, something is going wrong in that team. If they don't bounce back and they are a middle of the pack team, that's not where any of those players want to be. Selfmade even said, if I'm ever going to win, this is the roster to do it. Perks and Alphari came back to EU to join this roster. Carsey left at back-to-back 2-time champion in Mad Lions to join this roster. So I don't think any of them are content. I don't think any of them are like brushing it off. They're probably very self-critical. And if they can't turn that ship around from this week 1, then something is drastically going wrong in that team with the caliber of players they have.
Yeah, and certainly would have been nice for those players to be able to chill a little bit, have a 3-0 start, and coast. But now they're going to have to sweat for every week, for every game. Because again, now that you're 0-3 down, race for playoffs is difficult. Unless you turn the ship around to 180 degrees, if you keep having messy games, you're going to be in hot water after 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, as much as I'm also very critical on Vitality, I also think it's sometimes good to get a kick up the ass as a super team. You come in, you imagine they went 3-0 and they laid back a bit in scrims and then they cruise spring split and then they come to a playoffs and they just bomb out or something. I mean, we've seen iterations of G2 cruise a lot and then get kicks up the ass after going 0-4 over 2 weeks. Maybe it's a good thing for them, Maybe everyone thinks, well, now expectations are lower, Vitality suck, and then they're just like, you know what, actually, we do suck. And then they get put even more hours into practicing. It could be good in a way, but still very, very poor performance this weekend and a lot to be desired.
Yeah, we got a lot of maybes for Vitality coming up. We'll keep our eye and just have to see what happens at the end of the day. But speaking one of those teams, the one that Carsey left in this case, Mad, we put them in B tier. This may be one of the only teams on our list that I think we could have potentially bumped up. And I think our logic at the time was sound, but I think we underestimated the impact of Caedrel a little bit because that first game was a freaking carry clinic. From Elyoya. Absolute masterclass. And for the rest of the weekend, I think Elyoya played pretty solidly. Ultimately, wasn't able to have that same success that he did in the first game. And overall, I was pretty impressed by Mad Lions. I think we have a lot left to see from the rookies, but we already had a ton of people on Twitter coming out calling Unforgiven, the next great, 80 carry prodigy. Yeah. People were hyped. And he did. He had a fantastic game. He got a lot of resources funneled into him. But maybe tempering that a little bit. 2-1 week for Mad Lions. What's your read on the Lions right now?
I don't want to overreact, but phenomenal week from them. Like, you can take the SK slugfest and say, like, well, it wasn't a flawless week, right? They were really struggling in this SK game, 55-minute game that they ended up losing when I think they should have won that game. Yes, but then, they come to the day afterwards, day 3, they're against G2, and then they beat them in 25, 26 minutes, like handily. So very convincing game from them there, very convincing game against Vitality, but against SK struggling. Maybe we'll see some Mad Lions inconsistency regular season as we always have done, but biggest highlights for me, of course, EUphoria Kaiser. They're so good. It's crazy how good this jungle support are. And Reeker's been a bit quiet, but Unforgiven, man, I cannot praise this guy enough for his debut in the LEC. Like, he is always up in CS, always winning his lane, always having the push. Even in their loss against SK, this guy was like 10-2, doing insane things in fights with Jhin and things like this. Like his DPM, 30% of Mad Lions' damage share is Unforgiven, right?
Yeah.
He did 900 DPM against SK. Even though they lost, he's pulling 900 DPM and has 2 deaths in a game that has 50 kills. Like, what? This guy, I feel like, is showing signs of incredibly good consistency and really good reliability as a carry, which I want to say sometimes Mad Lions kind of lacked last year.
Sure.
Because I feel like Carzzy was a little bit inconsistent with Kaiser. Maybe they were both each other's demon, where, one of them jumps in, the other one follows, and then they both die. Whereas now it looks a lot more tempered from the bot lane of Mad Lions.
It's weird now because we called this out in our cast for Mad Lions, but like definitely Kaiser has been getting a little bit too aggressive and maybe invading when he shouldn't be invading, when he doesn't have enough vision and he's been dying. So it almost feels like the aggression that we used to attribute to Carzzy, some of those like whoops moments. Now Kaiser's getting a little bit of that, and now Unforgiven is like Mr. Stable and Mr. Reliable, which, as you highlighted, is great. Like 4-1-5 first game is Karthus. It was like, okay, but he played Karthus, he didn't have to do anything. 10-2-7 is Jhin in a super tight game. Like, great job.
With 55 kills.
And keep in mind, Jezu, with 3 lives between a GA, a Chemtech Drake, and his normal life as Ezreal, was eating into this guy every fight, basically. And this man still only died twice. Like, that is super impressive. And then obviously the last game as well.
Yeah, I think there's just really good signs, right? The low deaths, high DPM, good stats, really high CS out of lane, and then just the consistency of being able to be ahead of the enemy AD carry in farm going into mid to late game, right? When the game is in an even state, which was the SK game. Like, he was so far ahead in CS on Jhin. And I can't sing his praises enough. I don't want to overhype him because I don't want to sell him as like the new best AD carry, but the fact that Mad Lions take a player who finished 5th or 6th in the Prime League, was on an LEC Academy team, took them from that team, placed him on their starting roster, and he's having a debut like this. If this guy turns out to be an incredibly good AD carry, which I think he will be, then again, Mad Lions have proven to us that their scouting is just uncomparable. They just never fail.
What I'm really liking about, and again, not to oversell Unforgiven, because I think that it is in the same way it's a single week for Vitality, it's a single week for Mad Lions, and there's still a lot to be seen. But he plays well on an island. He's got the 3rd lowest bot proximity, 4th lowest bot proximity. So generally not camped a lot, only 9% of Elio's time. Elio is spending a ton more time in the mid lane. As we saw, a ton more time with Kaiser. He's doing well on an island. He's farming well, and the team is putting resources into him, which is a huge sign of faith. Again, they could just make this man play Jhin and not give him a lot of farm and trust someone else to carry, but they are consistently putting resources into this guy, and it's paying off. And he shows up in team fights. And it's like, for a Mad Lions team that we know, when all else fails, was at least in the past able to go back to team fights, that's huge. Like, that is massive. And I think that's...
Yeah, I agree. The last thing I was just going to say is Unforgiven. Good signs, good start. See if you can keep it up. Good consistency. Very good signs as well. I just talked about it. Like 900 DPM against SK. He was 30 CS up against SK at 15. He was averaging 11.3 CS per minute against G2. Like, these are really high numbers, quite inflated actually for a debut. I'm on the Unforgiven train.
Yep. I think the most impressive part of this is if you just had a 3-0 week, we could just call it a 3-0 week. But when you're playing so well in a contentious loss against SK and you still are you still have a great KDA as an AD carry player, you're still doing a lot of damage, you're still being high impact. That's always a great sign to me, because usually we get one side of the coin. We get the over-aggressive Inti AD carry, or we get the way too safe AD carry. And it feels like Unforgiven is, right now at least, towing that line. And that's the spot that all AD carries aspire to be in, on the edge of madness.
The last thing I'll say is, in classic Mad Lions fashion, Kaiser said in the interview, scrims were pretty rough, but it's stage games, and we always show up on stage games, and from knowing Mad Lions last year, I know that their scrims were always quite tough, but they somehow brought it back in stage games. I'm not going to leak things, but I know that they were losing a lot of scrims to other top teams, but then they come on stage and clap them.
Yep.
So, props to Mad Lions. Like, it seems they still have some of their signs from last year, which makes sense. They still have 3 other players. So, clutch jungle support, Armut being reliable, and then Unforgiven Reeker, good debuts.
Absolutely. One team I want to hit kind of quickly. I think there's still a lot left to be seen in this team, but it's Team BDS. And I think that's because BDS was a team that had so many variables that I think people could have told me that they expected to be a top team or a bottom team, and we would have had as much evidence to prove that. Because there's not a lot of proof with this team. You could speculate based on some of Adam's success on Fnatic, and you could speculate based on some of the K Corp success, but a lot of that was K Corp as a team. And what I'll say is that I was very much on the side of I expect nothing from BDS. But I will say that I was pleasantly surprised this weekend by their mid jungle. Nuclear Int and Syncroft. They weren't perfect games, but they had some bangers. They really did work this weekend, which was big for me because I look at Syncroft and I was like, oh, is this guy really going to be it? A jungler who facilitated a lot at an ERL level. Is he going to be able to stack up? But this man did work this weekend. Huge respect to Syncroft and Nuclear Int.
Yeah, mid-jungle were playing pretty good. I think Adam also had a pretty good game on Sion against Herit's Jayce, playing this matchup, which is quite tough, managing to get solo kills, winning top, and ended up losing the game because team fights didn't go his favor. I think one thing I'm missing from this team so far just yet is limit on a engage / pair up with jungle support.
Yeah, absolutely.
He did play Yuumi once, but when he plays Nami and Soraka, he's more of like a scaling team fight. Pushing bot is great, but don't really need to. And in the game that he does play, the one, I'll say, winning lane in this case, in the Lucian Nami, bot lane was not winning. I can tell you that for a fact. Matty was really struggling, and the 2v2 never really went in their favor. So I'm seeing signs of what's working for this team. Mid jungle for sure. I want to see Limit on more engaged supports where he's probably more confident and more game dictating and more vocal. But still, pleasantly surprised, I think, is a good way of putting it, mainly because I think if you look at BDS, the players with the lowest expectations were probably the mid-jungle, right? Syncroft coming in, weren't sure how good he is. Nuclear and split on Schalke, very underwhelming. Adam on Fnatic had his volatility, so probably looking at top lane to carry, and Limit was, a stapled good support in the LEC, top support. Maybe they can find some plays around the map. And then the ones who are kind of carrying the games are the mid-jungle, so that's already a good sign. Having a very strong, consistent early game focus mid-jungle always helps out both of your side lanes. So Maddie can, look at his performance, step it up a little bit. Adam, good first week, I think. So there's still some good signs for BDS.
Yeah. And I don't want to undercut Adam. Syncroft and Nuclear are who stood out to me the most, but Adam came in on Darius in quintessential Adam style. Beat the hell out of Wonder, which was cool. And then the Sion game against Herit, also awesome. Sad that he was not able to transition that to a win. I think we saw this in both the Herit and the Finn Jayce games, that even if you put Jayce down in the mid game, if his team is good, those empowered shock blasts are going to do work. And which is so weird because I felt like Jayce in the past was always you have to get ahead and you have to stay ahead champion. And now I look at Jayce's damage output in fights and I'm like, is Jayce a weak side top laner? Are we in the future of weak side Jayce?
I don't get it because both times the Jayce was getting clapped 0-2, 0-3, down 20 CS, 10 CS at 15 minutes, and the champ is not supposed to find a way back in the game when it's that far behind. I feel like the Jayce just got kills in team fights and then was able to push out sides for free because the champ that was ahead was overgrouping, and then they got their way back in the game. EU Jayce, man. So gets his way back in the game. But yeah, I still think the champ's really strong. It does have to win its lane and it does have to get ahead, and you naturally want to play for a Jayce. Having a Jayce that's behind on your team is as a famous man once said, it's about as useful as nipples on a man. So yeah, when the Jayce falls behind, it's not a good look.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that both those Jayce performances that we highlighted, both Finn and Herit, were very fortunate that the rest of their team was able to do some work. Yeah. And I would even say I think the good news, so the good news with Jayce is that I don't feel like you have, and I think that item trough point that has been used forever is probably over exaggerated these days with Caitlyn, but I think that Shock Blast is so good and Jayce combo is so strong that Caitlyn's never going to unless someone steps on a trap, Caitlyn's never going to one-shot someone on the backline reliably in a fight. But if Jayce gets a flank ever, even if he's on 2 items and someone else is on 3 or 4, if they're a squishy carry, he can just one-pop someone, and that's crazy.
Actually, yeah, I think small interesting meta. I'll small touch on this is you're right. I think Jayce is a really powerful poke champ, as we always know. And I feel like teams are drafting a lot into poke / team fight, especially in the East. We're seeing like Ezreal Yumis come out. We're seeing Zoe last picks on red side. We're seeing Corki blind picks constantly. LeBlanc is somewhat considered a poke champ / burst assassin, right? Jin as well. So I feel like a lot of the champs, a lot of comps right now are pure team fight or poke. Which is interesting. Yeah, we'll see how the meta develops, but Jayce definitely fits that. If you get a Jayce early rotation or an Ezreal, you definitely want to deny things like Zoe. Even Nidalees were being picked in the LCK.
Yeah, frankly, EU Nidalees don't quite hit the same way, but I would be excited to see us try it one more time. Maybe this is the year of the LEC Nidalee.
Just casting the game, and all of a sudden we see a spear fly between us. Oh my god!
That's my fear. Is you just feel like at any moment the collateral damage. If we're gonna get pulled into the matrix, and we're just instantly gonna get one shot by these random spears that are flying.
Cast the G2 game. We have to buy a new kitchen. Oh my god!
Yeah, the thing is people meme Jankos so much, but it's like our league was not. No, there weren't really that. Like we did not have a legendary Nidalee player. Like Jankos, the most obvious in the his accuracy, but
no, the memes are there. But Jankos is a really good player, of course.
I mean, yeah, obviously. I think the other team that we're kind of talking about now, talking about like this top side, and that's just really interesting to me is Rogue. I mean, a 3-0 start for this team. And I think that I was looking at the numbers because I was like, damn, what did Rogue do so well? And you were really good about highlighting earlier in the week how they were drafting and how they were setting up. But I got to say, a quick shout out to Otawamne, who is 9th in jungle proximity, gets literally no attention, but is always ahead in gold and CS, and they're 3-0, so these are naturally these. When you win, these stats are usually higher, but the laning stats still relevant to a certain degree, and still has a huge percentage of his team's damage share. Odo did work this weekend. He played weak side. He got some Ornn game. He got a Renekton game. Like, shout out to Odo. He had a up and down split last season. That best 5 against Herit was trash, to be completely honest with you, but he came out clutch in this one and also beat the hell out of Herit. So Odo looking great on this Rogue lineup.
Agreed. I think good showing in the week 1. Also, I think Odo's performance, I think, left a bitter taste in people's mouth from Worlds when, he was up against Khan, he was up against Nuguri. And yes, I think he did underperform a little bit at Worlds, but it's great to see him bounce back. I think the underperformance could come from multiple reasons. Remember, he was sick and things like this. So now that he's back, week 1, fresh start, somewhat fresh team, I'll say, with a new jungle, especially as a top laner. Looks good. Malrang surprised me a bit. I think a lot of his pathings and a lot of his decisions were pretty out there. He was forcing 4v5s when Larson was on a side lane. He was overstaying ganks for a lot of time and wasting a little bit of time here and there, but majority of the time it worked out. So props to Malrang. I remember I saw Odo's tweet that Malrang was like tearing up solo queue, but now in the new season he's like 49% win rate. So something's wrong with the server, not the player.
Yeah.
But the last person I want to touch on is Comp. And I think Comp is really important to highlight for this Rogue roster because, yes, he played 3 games of Jinx. He is a bit of a Jinx one trick, but I have to say, what a glow up. 32% of his team's damage makes sense on Jinx. Incredibly good numbers.
Yeah, he's number 1 in DPM and number 2 in damage share. Now, ranking in damage share is not really that valuable, but number 1 in DPM is sick. And as you highlighted, a lot of that is going to be because he played 3 games of Jinx, but remember, this is the man who had to replace Han Sama. And similarly, also, because Comp, I think, is going to be the guy who shows the numbers, Trimby, way better, at least that I saw in the laning phase. And now some of that's because a lot of these younger bot lanes are going to be less experienced. But remember, he was a huge kind of issue when he first came in spring. And we gave him the benefit of the doubt. He's young. He's going to make mistakes, whatever. And then it kind of, they were in this situation at Worlds where they just kept putting him on ranged supports. And it never looked good in a meta where so many people were playing Engage. But Lulu this weekend was super clean. He was always where he needed to be. That Rogue bot lane, I thought if anything, we would be like glossing over the Rogue bot lane to praise the Rogue top side if Rogue were going to win games. But the Rogue bot lane did, Comp and Trimby both, I think, show up this weekend.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the last thing I just want to say about Comp is last year he joined Vitality on the LEC team, spring 2021. He played 3 weeks of games and went 1-6, and then he got replaced, gone. And that was him, disappeared. After February last year, he vanished, gone from pro play. Comes back, 3-0 instantly. He's got more wins than he did in the entire year last year combined. The year before that, I believe they only won like 10 games in total throughout the entire year as well. So the fact that he was on such teams that were struggling so much. Even last year, he was considered a problem. I think was it Crownshot who came in to replace him, and Comp was supposed to be the issue in the team, and they wanted more of a vocal voice. I guess now he has a team where he can take a step back, and he already has loads of vocal voices around him, and he can focus on the game. And Comp is a player who was very, very high-low all throughout the last couple of years, always hovering around top 5, rank 1, in between Monster and solo queue. So it's great to see him on a team that performs. I think the only big question mark around Comp right now I have is, can you play other things than Jinx? Which I imagine he can.
Yeah.
But it's time to take Jinx away from Comp, I think, Mr. Week 2 LEC teams.
Yeah, and I will say that I think that Rogue are a great team and have proven to consistently be a very good team about like finding a way to play and a read on the meta that works for them. And usually we're like, awesome, good. And then when it gets to best of 5, that's usually when that fails. But Rogue have historically been a super good best of 1 team. I think that they came prepared with excellent week 1 LEC drafts. You know what I mean? I think the ceiling is ultimately the question of this Rogue team. How much can they play, different styles, et cetera, et cetera. Nodawame talked about it in his interview with Lore. They want to be a team where they can play anything, but we haven't really seen that yet. So that's kind of the goalpost for Rogue, I think, moving forward, is to like transcend the old Rogue time memes, transcend the old play for lane, one trick pony kind of style that we got used to seeing from Rogue. And that's not something I expect to change in a single week, but I think it's something we're going to keep track of.
Yeah, and just 2 quick things. If you remember Rogue from last year, Rogue was just a win lane, win game team. They were not a team fighting team. They tried to play team fight. I think it was in playoffs against, I'm going to say Mad Lions. I'm going to look it up as I keep talking. But they would pick Lucian, they would pick Jayce, they would pick champs like this, and this is how they would win games. They would take your towers early, they'd move around the map, have insane gold leads, and then of course they'd throw. That's basically how Rogue would work, Rogue time. This time we're seeing so much different gameplay from them. 3 games already, full team fight. Larsen's playing Victor. We got Oda on Ornn. They're playing full team fight. Jinx, Rakan. Really surprising to see from them coming out the gate straight away. And yes, it was, I believe, against Rogue. Mad Lions, sorry. But anyway, massive props to them. And I think that just talking about meta read, if I'm a team in the LEC and I'm coming into week 1, I think the best thing to do, I've said this multiple times, but I'll say it last time, is draft scaling, team fight, and lanes that aren't losing super hard. You don't have to overcomplicate it with, single target damage comps that want to play over side lane with like Jayce and Jin or something, or some kind of overcomplicated comp that has to win early game to get ahead, right? You pick a comp that scales well, has good team fight, good wave clear, and you chill out a bit. And you rely on yourselves being a good enough team to slow the game down and win. Why? Because in early spring, week 1, teams are not very good at closing out games. They're brand new rosters. They've only been scrimming a week or 2, and they haven't got the best meta reads. So when it comes to closing out games, it becomes very difficult. So I think slowing the pace of the game down is important, and scaling in teamfight always is the easiest way to do that. Jinx, Rakan, Ornn, all this good stuff. Why is that a good thing? Well, the later the split goes, I would rather be a team that plays it safe early, gets good early wins in the split, and then tries things out, than trying things out at the start of the split, realizing we're losing games, and then need to win games towards the end of the split, right? It just puts a cushion underneath you, where like week 6, you can be like, well, we already have 9 wins or 7 wins, 8 wins. We're probably going to get playoffs. We're probably going to make top 4. Let's try out a different comp, rather than come out trying to guess into something and play something random and then losing games, right?
I'm completely on the same page as you. And I think that the thing is, the way that competitive league works with how much can change patch to patch to patch to patch. If you have a period of time where you feel like you have guaranteed wins, get them. Because ultimately, like, until playoffs patch, to be honest with you, like, your meta read can be totally worthless. Your playstyle read can be totally worthless. So if you have a surefire way to get wins, go for it. Now, I think if similarly, if there's like one particular skill set that you believe is always the optimal way to play League of Legends and you want to invest in that, I won't knock that. I probably disagree with you, but like there's you don't have to just do it this way. But I think that it's just a fist fight at the start of spring split. These games are not high quality. You are not playing against people who are like at their peak. You are not at your peak. So just get the wins, because it's not even, to be honest with you, the best practice in the world. You could be great at 1-3-1 at the start of the season. And congrats. Everyone is bad at the start of the season and you're winning with 1-3-1. Great. Now they're good at the end of the season. What is that worth?
Yeah, by week 5, 6, 7, teams get they get a lot better. And at the start of the split, you can kind of pick up those free wins. And I think The biggest reason for this, and the biggest reason this works in Europe, in my opinion, because I've seen this every year for like 4 years straight in spring, that the same thing always happens, is because the LEC is best of one. And best of one is just so volatile. If it was best of three, like an Eastern region, then of course you can play whatever you want, whatever's working in scrims, try to play comfort or try to play styles that you want to fix and change, because you can lose a game one. You can go 1-1 in a series. You can still bring it back. Best of three gives you so much more room to explore and grow and try different things. Whereas in LEC, best of one, you have to be a bit more careful, right? Make sure you got early best of one so you can feel comfortable later on the split to play different things and get better. So that's why best of three is better for competitive reasons, I think, for the players, because they can be a bit more loose when it comes to early spring or the middle of the split. But yeah, I think with best of one, just don't take that risk. I think a cushion is always better than trying to come out the gates trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think slow and steady, or if you're playing someone above you that you maybe are not confident in beating, going full on cheese. But if you exist in that gray area, I feel like you're just not setting yourself up for success. Either fully reliable or full gamble, but like respect that it's a best of one. And yeah, you're right. I think you're right. If it's a different format, we might see completely different teams. Like Rogue might be middle of the pack in a best of three world. Who knows?
I'll always remember something Youngbuck told me, which was quite funny in XL, where it's like we would draft a comp with some like 2 losing lanes, and we would outscale them, and he would say, well, it's on them, let them explode our Nexus. See if they can do it. Let them try to explode our Nexus. You guys aren't going to try to explode theirs until around 25, 30 minutes, but they're going to try to explode yours, so just try to stop them. See what happens, Let them run at you. It's all on them, pressure's on them. So it was kind of like a cool thing to think about, where you're just kind of, farming your jungle, covering lanes. They're not getting any leads in 10 minutes, and then you're just smiling to yourself like, well, guys, it's an even game with 15 minutes, and you haven't even got a single dragon yet. You okay?
Yeah. Damn, dude. I mean, I like that. Frankly, that's my kind of League of Legends. Let the decisions come to you. Just sit back, do your thing. Like that's low pressure. I especially if you've got a young roster, I feel like more people should just do that for the younger teams. Just like, hey, you're having a good time. You're chilling. We're having a cup of tea. They want to rock up. Like, we'll fight, but we're just sitting here. We're waiting. We're chilling. It's not a bad. It's boring. It's not exciting. League of Legends. Exactly. Work towards it. Grow up. Let's jump over to some of the hot takes now. Those are kind of some of the teams that stood out to us most. Ooh. And I'm going to strategically pick a hot take so we can talk about another team that I think people are going to want us to talk about. So shout out to Yannick, who at Jarls. I'm assuming these J's are Y's, Yar, but maybe not. Maybe it's Jarls. Yar. Jarls 779. Fnatic will win the LEC and NA will win Worlds. We'll start with the second half of that. No. Bro, I feel like we're still better than NA by a pretty decent margin, and we're not even close to winning Worlds yet. So let's slow. That's a little too spicy, Yannick. We're just gonna slow down. I'm just gonna say like, I know it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but let's put the bottle down, Yannick. That's all I'll say.
I saw a funny comment somewhere, I don't know if it was on socials, and I said it yesterday on my stream, where it was like, NA has a Master 5-head plan that over the last 9 years, they're importing EU players, making them washed up and sending them back to EU so that eventually they can beat us with our own players being washed up. And I was like, oh my God. So maybe they are catching up.
The real Rift Rivals is the off-season.
Yeah. Off-season is always so spicy, man. You think Worlds is over and you're like, oh, League's done, and you wake up one morning, you look at your phone, the news. NA winning Worlds. Yeah, I'm gonna say no to that one. Hot take.
Yeah, based Caedrel. Thank you for coming out here. Oh God, I'm so glad your original opinions are just. Oh, I'm floored. That's it. Fnatic on the other side, I think, is the interesting one, because Fnatic obviously hitting the ground running. Hilly Baba looking like an absolute god. Let's talk a little bit about Fnatic in the scheme of things. I think we saw everything we could want to see in a Fnatic week 1, which was we got some inting. We got some great and terrible. Well, not really that many. We got mostly 90% great Hylissang moments. I think that one Thresh play in bot lane was a little grief. Other than that, we were pretty much chilling. And we got to see kind of this team come back pretty consistently mid to late game, which is something that I would have thought we would get from Vitality with how many veteran players were there. But like Fnatic on average early game stats were pretty booty. And there's that's like weren't great, but despite that, came out and found wins. And I think that's huge for their first week.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to touch on when it comes to Fnatic, because I think there's a lot of positives to take away from the week. Team seems to be meshing well, sitting at 3 wins pretty comfortably. Bot lane's doing good. Hylissang, I mean, I'm a worshipper of the Church of Hylissang. If I'm going to give a Spring Split MVP, I think Hylissang is already one of my candidates at the top of the list. The biggest issue I saw with Fnatic was their early games, and the worry I have is that the early games normally come from jungle. Razork really struggled in the first 15, 20 minutes of the games and came back towards team fights, and his lanes were the ones to kind of help him out rather than him helping out his lanes. And if you think of Razork and Misfits last year, it was the absolute opposite side of the coin, where early games were completely dominated by Razork. Misfits got early leads through Razork, and Razork was the one making plays happen, invading, diving lanes. Didn't get to see too much of that in week 1, so that's the only kind of worry I have on these 3 games of sample size. Early games were not the greatest, which is a bit worrying. I think going into next week, I'm sure he'll try to turn it around, and he probably knows very consciously that the early games were not as good as he wanted them to be. But I think this team can only get stronger if they fix those early games.
Yeah, and I'm like, across the board, I just think that there was a lot of really good moments, and a lot of that consistent team play. We're still seeing strength coming out of the bottom lane. I liked that Fnatic won without Hylissang on an engaged champion too. That Zilean game, obviously, it felt more like, when you look back on it, and Vitality had such a massive lead, and it's not like Hylissang played flawlessly. He did get caught multiple times. It's not perfect. I definitely don't want to tell people that Hylissang should be playing, Zilean every game, or that Fnatic really like super duper outplayed that game. Like, I think that was Vitality's game to lose, and they did lose it. But I still like that we are seeing a Fnatic who, while Razork does still, I think, need to grow into the role, where Hylissang doesn't always have to be Mr. Engage Bot, Mr. Save the Day with some crazy play. Because I think you could totally rely on that. And I love that Hylissang does that. Of course, I would always rather watch a Hylissang Pike, Hylissang Rakan game over a Hylissang Zilean game. But I think for Fnatic as a whole, and looking at the big picture, it's good to be able to get him out of that role.
Yeah, Hilly's got his 2 pocket picks, hasn't he? Pike and Zilean, oftentimes they come out if you blind pick something like, I think it was Rakan or Vitality, just going to lock in a Zilean. You're playing a full single target damage burst comp. Okay, I pick my Zilean. Go dive us.
Dude, it's actually so brutal. And there's so many people in the comments saying that Fnatic are going to go 18-0. I think that's steep. I just don't think you can ever predict an 18-0. I think that's way too hot of a take. Because again, it is best of 1, folks. How many times did G2 be like, this is the split where we do it, and then they just grief 1 week in 1 game? And none of these Fnatic games were like super duper clean. There were still some oopsies across everyone. So it feels a little premature.
Yeah, last person I want to touch on Fnatic is Wunder. We touched on him a bit, but seems to be fitting in pretty well. I mean, yes, you can see the flashy plays of the top dives and him outplaying it. His lane phase against Adam was quite rough in the early stages, but he's against the Darius, right? But the fact that he's a top laner, just going to throw out some stats here with a little bit of context, right? 29% of his team's damage, which is already incredible as a top laner. He played GP, he played Gwen, two kind of carry tops, we'll say, and 1 weak side top of Gragas, so he's shown flexibility. He's the 2nd highest kill participation on the team, which is quite baffling to me. The fact that he has 77% KP and his jungler is 10% lower, his mid laner is 10% lower, right? So he's involved in a lot of the plays, and we saw that with the Gragas finding engages with the GP ults and things like this.
Keep in mind, for contrast, Odo's on the exact opposite end. He's on like one of the lowest top lane kill participation percentages of certainly of any top laner. So it's so crazy to see the contrast there, where like Odo's like put on an island, winning his lane on his own, doing well in damage stats, but like not a huge participant in a lot of the team play going on early. Whereas like Wunder, maybe a little bit more volatile, certainly has been getting, camped a lot and had that pretty awful lane against Adam. And again, as is to be expected versus Darius, but maybe more solo kills than should have happened, certainly. But he has huge kill participation. He's a part of like all of these plays. He's a huge portion of the engage, and you saw that especially in the Gragas game, where he was just everywhere. He was on every single fight. He was going in with that body slam, partially because no one could kill him. So good spot to be for Wunder.
Yeah, he was unkillable. He really was against just 1 single AP damage of TF. But I think the reliability of Wunder is a big boom for Fnatic. Like, this guy can pretty much play whatever you want, slot him in. He has a really big champion ocean. And he seems to be on point. I mean, I looked at Wunder's most played champions over the last 2 years. It's a lot of Ornn, it's a lot of Gragas, it's a lot of tanks top, which I think he's happy to play, which is really good for Fnatic. But he can also play weak side carries like Gwen and GP, which you don't really have to play for. They can sit on their island, clear waves. They can back off when you're trying to cross map, and they'll clear waves pretty easily, and they'll be useful later on. So I think the versatility and the flexibility that Windows shown in week 1 is really, really important for Fnatic in the way they want to play the game.
Yeah, and I think not to oversell. I think our goal here is to remember that it's the same week for every single team. So if we're not going to condemn Vitality to death after an 0-3, we can't tell you that Fnatic are LEC champions yet. Not trying to say that. It is still a single week. But the big questions that we had for this team, we knew the bot lane was solid. No question asked. But the question was Wunder going to be able to get back to peak? First week, very good sign for that. How is Razork going to fit with the team? Was he going to be able to recreate with Misfits? That's still up in the air. Still a bit of a question mark. Was Humanoid going to look good? And Humanoid looked pretty good. So I'd say you're basically 2 for 3 on the big Fnatic questions that were like, okay, we can put them S tier, but these are the things that have to go right. And I would say right now, in week 1, the fact that most of those things are already going so well, hugely, hugely positive for Fnatic. And while I think there's always going to be people going, but are they going to crash and burn? It can happen at any moment, which in the historical scheme of super teams and teams that are this stacked, I think is fair. Right now, Fnatic looking good. Fnatic looking excellent. And definitely feel like I don't want to call them the strongest team in the league again because their wins were a bit all over the place. But in terms of if you're a Fnatic fan looking at this Fnatic lineup, you should feel good. They are not just because of the 3-0, but like things are looking solid. The concerns look like the checklist. Things are getting checked off that list, and you're on the road to being a contender for the title there.
Yeah, I'm sure the vibes are good as well. And Yamato is always a nice little voice to listen to before you're going into the game, telling you how you're going to dismantle the enemy team.
So here's the question. Fosty, let's go to Fosty. Iconic memer Fosty, at Fosty Law. I want your take on this take, Caedrel. XL would go 3-0 if not for a few mistakes mid-game. Overall solid and possibly top 3 team.
I remember their game against BDS. They should have won that game. I'm sure about that.
That game was a roughie. They had everything in their favor. They had really good scaling. They made it far enough in the game.
The game against G2 was the GP Corki game, right? It was winnable for sure. I will say, off the get-go, Friday, Saturday's games were winnable for XL. They were in winning states multiple times, and they could have won the games. But the question is, the way it's phrased, and just the generic saying, if we did this differently, we would have won, This is the classic thing in every game, right? If we didn't get dove bot and we backed off, we would have won. If we managed to get your in-hit with one more hit, we would have won, right? That's the game of League of Legends, right? There's so many what-ifs. It's a game of inches. If I had won one more game in the LEC, I'd made playoffs, man. And there was a game against Rogue where we had a 10k gold lead and we threw. But we didn't. Okay, and that's the beauty of the game. What if?
Yeah, the what ifs. I think on the scheme of things, I will say that I'm a pretty big pessimist. And you predict they make playoffs, and I predicted they didn't. And admittedly, that was with no game footage whatsoever. But I'm generally pretty pessimistic when it comes to Excel, and it sucks because again, this isn't necessarily the fault of the players on the roster, but the org has just failed me so many times that I have a hard time getting super hyped. But I will say that Nuke Duck looks solid this weekend. Patrick Advian lane had some ups and downs, but that last game obviously against Vitality was super great. Loved the Xayah build, and Finn did pretty good. Beat the hell out of Broken Blade in that early laning phase. Broken Blade way too disrespectful at GP level 1. The Jayce game, he got absolutely bodied, but he came back in a big way. And I think that's the most you can ask for a guy who's coming back right now. And definitely people are going to super duper hype him up. Like, oh, Finn was the one we should have been excited about the whole time. Alpharian perks are terrible. But I think that, give Finn his moment. Like, the man did play super well.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, horrible year last year in NA, of course. But yeah, individually looks good. It just goes to show that one NA import beats 2 NA imports in that XL versus Vitality match.
Bro, come on. Okay. All right. Excel looking promising. Not the best week overall in terms of results. We'll see what they do. Let's go back to the Vitality thing, as they're the spiciest news for the week. We've got one from Emu2 at Emu2_. Replacing Perks with a promising rookie will make Team Vitality stronger by the end of the split. I'm going to say this is definitely a reach. This is a big, big reach. And there's a lot of these. There's a lot of Perks and Alfari are washed. There's a lot of this. And don't get me wrong, guys. I get being frustrated because I think, especially like when we talk about Perks and Alfari, we look at the peak of both of those players, and they're probably not there right now. But nah, man, like people, you can't disrespect Perks like this. You can call Perks' last 3 games absolute trash, and that's fine. But like the man's historic achievements are so big. Like he's like the Michael Jordan of EU League of Legends. You know what I mean? And it doesn't line up with their careers at all. But I just mean in terms of pedigree. And like you can't ever count this man out. And look, if he bombs out for an entire year, I will be with people. But until he bombs out, kind of like G2 last year with this Reckless Super team, until they're like dead on the friggin' floor, you still have to believe that this guy can come back and be a contender.
Yeah, and the biggest reason for that is his track record. Did he lose his lane a couple of times on this weekend? Last weekend, yes. Could he have done more? Yes. Was his performance leaving a lot to be desired? Definitely. But if you look at his track record, yeah, I mean, to say that a rookie would step in, first of all, depend on the rookie, right? I don't want to contextualize things too much here. And second of all, the most important thing is behind the scenes, behind the game, outside of the game, what he brings in reviews, what he brings in terms of game knowledge, what he brings in communication in the game, right? Lane phase is one thing, but when you finish a scrim, you finish a competitive game, his opinions have a lot of value behind them. He holds a lot of pedigree behind what he says and what he believes in the game and how the game should be played. And he has a lot of achievements to back it up. So yeah, still just 1 week. I wouldn't call it an overreaction that Perks has like struggled. I think it's very normal to look at his lane phase and be like, yeah, he's definitely struggling. And in the games, he's not really finding much to play around. But to say that a rookie mid stepping in would do better, I would say that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a
but
reach.
It's a hot take.
And I will say it is a hot take, and that's what we asked for, and people have certainly delivered. We got a lot of NA broke Perks and Alfari. You know, we got a lot of those, and I'll just say like, we'll see, guys. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I think it's too soon to call it now, but by the end of the split, we will definitely have an answer one way or the other. Transitioning over, Caedrel, my favorite one from one of many in this theme from Krillers at C_Stybie. I'm just gonna bomb whatever that is. Sorry, buddy. Proud fan of Fnatic. Caedrel can solo cast the entirety of LEC. I think this is a yes. I think you could do it. I think your voice would die because you're literally already casting all of LPL and LCK. And I think by the end of the year, you would sound like you've been smoking for like 30 years trying to push your voice that hard. But I think you could. Do you think you could do it? Do you think you could solo cast the entire thing?
I think I could solo cast the entire thing if it wasn't casting and I could lay back in my chair and just talk to Twitch chat and then talk about the game every now and then go really hard on the important games. I think I could do that. I wouldn't be able to cast the games back to back to back 5 games a day every weekend nonstop. No. But yeah, maybe. Yeah, but then I'd be doing, even right now I'm doing like LPL all morning, LCK all morning, and then I have like a 20-minute transition time to LEC. So, and my voice is fine. So I reckon I could do it if it was just like co-streaming vibes rather than casting vibes.
I don't want to overinflate the ego, but I'm just saying if we bring back themed weeks, I don't know if you remember themed weeks. We had like a jungle week. We could have a Caedrel week, just to really puff your ego up as much as possible. And just Caedrel. We could make it. It'd be so cringe. Everyone would wear like a Caedrel outfit. We could just totally ruin it. We'd be like those when your parents are like way too supportive.
What is a Caedrel outfit? What is that? You're just gonna
wear
I don't know.
We could all wear like
my face.
We could all wear your Harry Potter ass glasses and like be like Pog, let's go, man, and just like make it so uncomfortably cringe.
Are those the first 2 things that come to mind when you think of me? My glasses and Pog.
Well, I'm kind of thinking it up on the spot. It would be a week of great analysis. We could invite Gordon Ramsay on and get him to DMCAU in person.
No, the problem is it wouldn't work because I think if, for example, you and Medic tried to, impersonate / dress up as me, I can't grow a beard, and your guys' beards are phenomenal.
Also, I'm not shaving this beard for anyone because I don't have a jawline, which is the great secret that this beard hides.
That's 5 weeks right there, baby. That's 5 weeks right there. Yeah. So I think you would never be able to pull it off because it's a mustache gap. It's a beard diff.
Okay, bold prediction for anyone who's watching. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter at Daniel Dracus at Caedrel. Who will look better after 5 weeks, Vitality or Caedrel's beard? We'll see. We'll keep track. Transitioning over, the last thing I want to talk about, something that
5 more weeks, huh?
Submitting hot takes on is MVPs of the split, and I wanted to talk about our predictions. But first, we will go to Ego at Ego Death DETH. Mad Unforgiven will be MVP of the split. So we'll just run through some of them. There's a lot of people. There's a comp will be, let's just go through a bunch. Cloudy Sunday says comp will be MVP of the split. Hollow Boy says Odo Omne will be the world's MVP. There's a bunch of Hylissang MVPs in here. Who are actually your Verlevis says Hylissang will be MVP. So who's actually, and it's 1 week again, so it's way too soon, but this is the point of hot takes and bold opinions. Who is your front runner right now that you would expect to be MVP this season?
I would put around 2 or 3 on the list. So I would put Hylissang on the list 100%. I would put EUphoria on the list. I would put Odo Omne on the list. I'm just picking one from every team kind of here right now.
Sure.
I don't know who I would pick from G2. Maybe Jankos from G2. And then I'll pick one more team. I'll say... I have no idea. VTO. I liked VTO's performance this weekend. And I think if Misfits are finding success, a lot of it will come from him as well. The Silasy prediction. Love me some mechanics, love me some flashy stuff. So yeah, I'll use my dark horse MVP as VTO, and then the other couple that I just said. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's hard because it's MVP is also, it's so much about it's like certain roles are just so much more likely to get MVP, I think. And it's not, it's usually whoever can be the most obvious hard carry. So Hylissang is so good at support that I think he's probably the exception to this, but normally it's really hard for a support to get MVP. Like you really have to clearly be making the game-winning play every game for support to get MVP, because oftentimes your impact is just not as immediately visible as a mid lane or AD carry. So Hylissang is the only support that I would put on that list. Not that Kaiser is not playing fantastically, not that Trimby isn't stepping up, not that there's not a lot of supports who I think are good and could get the title, but I think when it comes to voting, there's just no one who will get votes like Hylissang will get votes. And similarly, EUphoria is the other one that I want to look at, because I think that, in my opinion, and maybe this won't show, but when people want to talk about like Unforgiven as a potential candidate, and he has been great, a lot of that is going to be because of the team around him and the support that sets him up. And I think part of the reason that Unforgiven has gotten to kind of turbo chill on a side lane in a lot of these games up until, team fights and big moments or catch midways is because EUphoria is doing so much around the map. And Reeker is obviously the person who most directly benefits from that, because EUphoria spends by far the most of his time in the mid lane. But I think that like that's the one that you said that I think really sticks with me, is that I think EUphoria is a guy that just makes stuff happen.
I just realized your logic of like it's very hard to get MVP, especially with like the way you just described it. It feels like Unforgiven's going to get it, because like EUphoria will set him up, but Unforgiven will smack him down, and then of course we'll see the flashy plays and the stats, and like he'll smurf it out in his rookie season. Maybe he'll win Rookie of the Split, and I think MVP maybe as well. Has anyone ever won? Has anyone ever won Rookie and MVP of the Split combined?
I don't know if you can. I think you can, but I think you can. You must be able to. So the only thing I remember back to is the G2 seasons where I think Perks won Rookie of the Split and Trick won MVP. And I can't remember if Trick was eligible for Rookie, because I can't remember what the hell Trick did before G2. Excuse me, fans. I can't remember that one. I'm trying to see if anyone else was even close. Caps' first split was all right, but he couldn't have won. There's no way he was MVP caliber, because that wasn't like a great year for Fnatic. They didn't super pop until he was like full
maybe one day
peak Caps. It could
comes
happen.
In as a rookie and wins MVP. But that's like the Giga Chat double award, walk away, refuse to elaborate.
Yeah, that's perfect. Just quit. Win once. We play one game of Street Fighter. I beat you one time and I retire undefeated. That's the strategy, dude.
100% win rate.
100% win rate. Never play again.
Put it in the Twitter bio.
Yeah, and I just again, I don't want to I feel like we're overpraising Unforgiven, not because he has not earned it from a great week, but because I just don't want to put this much pressure on a young player's shoulders. But like, this guy was on literally no one's radar. This
Unforgiven,
was
you're gonna win worlds.
This was the most random pickup of all goddamn time, and we weren't gonna flame it because we're like, all right, we trust Mac. We'll see what happens here. But the dude did pop in his first few games, so he's definitely like, I put I think Reeker above him for my rookie of the split. I can't even remember who you put for your rookie of the split. Was it Zlatan?
It
was Zlatan, right?
It was Zlatan. Yeah, it was Zlatan.
Bro, this is how what a super week does to your memory's bad. I'm being a bad podcast host. I should know about
brain
these things.
fog.
Regardless, Unforgiven was on neither of our radars, and now he's very much on. I think everyone's radar. Something I'm excited to watch. Let's see. I want to get one more juicy hot take.
One more hot take. Hot take. I saw a couple hot takes.
But, wait. Do you have one? Give me one. No, go.
Well, that's one I saw, but wait, let me open up. I don't know why, but every time I open up a browser on my PC, my sound like cuts out for a second.
Oh, that sucks. Also, sorry to everyone who's listening, because this became the most scattered podcast of all time, but I'm just enjoying all of these tweets, but it means we've talked about MVP, we've jumped back to teams, we talked about rookies, we've jumped back to teams, like we're just it's a little scattered. So we'll call this general LEC discussion, is what we'll call this section. Yeah. All right, did you find one?
Some of these takes are not super hot, they're okay takes.
Lukewarm takes.
We got a hot take from Jamada.
Okay.
Vitality will go 9-9 and go 7th, miss out on playoffs. I think 9-9 is guaranteed playoffs, so I'll take 8-10 there instead of 9-9, and we'll miss out on playoffs. I don't know if Vitality will miss out on playoffs, because then who would you put in to make playoffs that is better than Vitality? I mean, saying better than Vitality now is very easy because they're 0-3, right? But let's take Vitality out of the equation, and let's imagine in a simulation that you have Fnatic, Mad, Rogue,
G2
as the 4, which have already made it. Then we'll say Misfits XL or Misfits SK, XL, BDS, I think the 5-6 spot is like...
The XL, SK, BDS, Misfits pack of 4 is like super hard call. Because Misfits are 2-1 right now. But I'm not going to tell you that they're heads and shoulders better. And similarly, I don't know how to feel about SK, to be completely honest with you. While they did ultimately win that Mad game, and it was a banger of a game. It was like... And Jezu, to be fair, I think did very well this weekend. They're still a little all over the place. I think it's really... hard to confidently. Yeah, it's hard. 6th is hard. I actually think 6th is going to be like so tight. I think every other thing I feel really confident in that top 5, but 6th feels next to impossible because a ton of people are like, oh, Misfits are the dark horse. They're going to battle for the last playoff spot with SK, but it's like, I don't think that that's a 2-horse race. I think that there's like 5 people fighting for that last playoff spot. Sorry, Astralis. I don't think you're fighting for that last playoff spot right now.
Astralis didn't look too hot in their games. I think Dior didn't have a too bad of a debut, but yeah, a lot of the wins, like we talked about on the first episode, a lot of the wins for Astralis last year came from just individual plays which saved the game, and a lot of the games they were already behind a lot, and they had to come back from enemy mistakes. But yeah, that didn't seem to come together from this. Again, the Misfits game was close, I believe. Yeah, but then again, another hot take. Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say that the big thing for Astralis is we really needed them to hit the ground running because they kept so much of their roster. They kept so much of that core synergy. And they're, again, at the bottom of the gold deficit. We're tracking 8 and 14 now, by the way, for gold, not 10 and 15 anymore, just to keep you guys up to date. So their gold deficit at 14 minutes was like negative 2.4K on average, which is just like, dude, it's like week 1. Like, this is surely this is the time to pop off a little bit, but it's not there. And that's brutal.
Saying that, they did make a little bit of a run at the end of summer split, so maybe they'll do it again. Didn't they win loads of games in?
Yeah, they won a bunch. It was with the Zanzara Trundle era, and they were able. There was the White Knight Renekton Pentakill. I want to say, or was it Elise and Pentakill? I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, but Renekton. A lot of these takes I'm seeing a lot of the same take. 2 things I'm seeing. Number 1 is Vitality won't make playoffs, which I think it's a hot take. I like hot takes. I like spicy takes. If they don't make playoffs, what does that even mean for the region? I don't know. What happens to Perks? What happens to Alphari? Because you remember like teams like Origin who finished 10th place with upset Alphari on them, Nuktak, and then they all still found top teams anyway.
Well, it's sad because we're in another situation where I think G2 was last year, where that team it was supposed to be impossible for that team to lose, and look what happened. And that's what kind of makes me sweat. Is like, are we going to lose a lot of our And if these players do really bad, I think that obviously they still have to redeem themselves. I don't want to like be like, oh, it's the worst thing in the world if they're playing like crap. But like we lost Reckless, we lost Mickey X, which is like 2 big hits to our bot lane pool, regardless of how you feel. Hansama Bwipo. And that was less to do with the G2 collapse. Those are just players that are leaving, right? But with the G2 collapse alone, we lost Mickey X and we lost Reckless to K-Corp. And I hope Reckless does well on K-Corp. And I hope Mickey finds a team that he's happy with eventually, because I still think he is, when he's playing well, one of the best sports in the league, one of the few people who can contest the Kaiser and Hylissang. But then, like, are we going to lose Selfmade? Are we going to lose Perks and Alfari again? And, like, again, if they're playing really badly, it won't feel bad at the time, but I still believe in those players, and it would suck to see this project explode and those players just kind of disappear forever in the way that it. And again, I don't want to condemn Reckless because I think K-Corp was super cool and I'm glad he's in the LFL. But like Reckless just feels like he's gone now, right? It no longer feels like we're going to see it. You can't expect Reckless to be back on an LEC team. Is now what I feel like.
I saw a clip where Reckless said on his stream that he's only going to be gone for 1 year because he needs to get back to his goal of winning Worlds. So 2023 is back, and he wants it to be with K-Corp. So we'll see what happens there. But the second hot take that I'm seeing a lot is EU has gotten weaker over the last 2 years, which I can agree with if you look at results, right? 2020 was it semis? And then at Worlds, I always take Worlds as the context. And then last year, of course, it was hardly quarters with just one team. I think 2020 was not a bad year. Like Fnatic almost beat Top Esports to make semis as well. E2, yes, they were really struggling against Damwon, of course. I mean, Damwon was just unbeatable that year. So 2020 wasn't too bad, I think, but last year was a bit of a disaster. And then just a follow-up for that is like, how important is bringing new talent to the league? How important is, people like Mad Lions as a team, as an org, even Mac to the region and things like this for scouting players like Unforgiven or Elioya last year to help kind of keep EU afloat internationally, right? Because if you look at, as an example, if you look at T1, for example, they are an absolute talent machine. I'm going to miss names here, but if you think about it, there's about 7 or 8 players who aren't on T1 anymore, which are in the LCK. And off the top of my head, I think of players like Effort, Kuz, who are in the LCK. Right now they have Zeus brought up, Owner, Gumayushi, Teddy, who is in the LCK still, who was part of T1. I think Lehens was on T1 at one point. There's so many T1 players, and I'm sure people will say in the comments, that are actually in the LCK, and it'll blow your mind. Kana just came to my head again. Peanut.
Yeah.
This team was, I think, the biggest talent machine in the LCK.
And some of those players have started in other places, whether it's LPL teams or I forgot the LPL minor league, the lower LPL league, but what I will say is that like this is my take on I think kind of, I don't want to say East versus West, but like LCK LPL versus LEC basically, right? And I think that the thing that I see a ton, and I would love your opinion on this, Mark, because it's not my most formed opinion, but I've been thinking about this, is like it feels to me like we are always playing catch up on high level league fundamentals, and the huge individual skill gaps aren't as common as they used to be back in like season 4, season 5, whatever, where our players are just getting solo killed left and right. It definitely still does happen. There are still players that are heads and shoulders better than our players individually, but like watching especially that Gen G series this weekend, I was like, this is top tier League of Legends in week 1. You know what I mean? And this is great. Whereas I look back at our week and it's like really all over the place. You got people dying on side lanes, getting caught out left and right. And it just feels like we're it feels like their teams, their good teams, because not all their teams are this, their best teams are hitting the ground at a really solid high fundamental level and then are improving from there. Whereas it feels like even our teams that are stacked like Vitality are coming in and like it feels like relearning parts of the game and relearning how to play as a team. And I just don't see that as much in the LCK. And it's not perfectly black and white because there are LCK teams. There certainly have been LCK super teams that have collapsed, have fallen apart immediately. Like it's not 100% LCK LPL and it's 100% or in 0% LEC. But like a lot of these great orgs in the LCK and the LPL feel like they are so good at bringing teams up to that like acceptable standard of this is high tier competitive League of Legends, and then those players keep growing from there as like a baseline. And that's something that I've just watching those like really good series in the LCK and even the LPL this weekend. That's what I feel like I'm seeing so much that I just wasn't seeing in the LEC. So what's your read on that?
Yeah. Before I jump into that question, which I'm super like hyped to talk on, I just looked at the T1 stats. Okay, just in recent years, Gory EDG now. He went to is it EG? I don't know. Gory went across to an LPL team. I think this might be wrong. Anyway, Efforts on Sandbox. Elim is on a Freaka Freaks, Kongdong Freaks, whatever. Teddy, Hoyt, Kuz, Closer, Kana. These are all players. Then they brought up Asper, who's on their substitute roster now. Keria, Gumayushi, Owner, Zeus. These are so many iterations of T1 just in the last 2 years, right? Gory's on FPX now, I believe, but it just says next team on the website. But yeah, they've exported so much talent, and I just think T1 just props to them as such a huge talent factory. But I think the interesting discussion there about the strength of the Eastern teams is like, even if you don't have the best game knowledge, even if you're just a fan of League of Legends in general, you can watch a game or a series like Genji Damwon, you can watch a series like Damwon T1, and you can feel the level of gameplay is just different. Like the way the game's being played, just it's a bit of an intangible, but you just watch and you're like, damn, I am watching the best League of Legends in the world right now. And it all comes down to, my opinion, is because you view the game and it turns into this sort of dance, and it's so beautiful to watch where no matter what happens on the map, the other team is either trading evenly or slightly ahead. So you're having tier 1 trades, you're having bot tier 1 trades, you're having mid tier 1 trades, you're having tier 2 trades on either side, Dragon for Herald. Everything's always a dance, everything's always a trade, and it all comes down to an eventual team fight. It's never like one team takes the lead and then they just snowball the game. It's always both teams take the same kind of lead up to a dragon fight, and then there's the biggest fight. And it's just an even game state until then. If you watch the Damwon series against T1, it's like that. You watch this Genji Damwon series, it's like that. One team slightly ahead going into it, then the other team wins a fight, then the other team wins a fight, and it's always just like a game of ping pong where it's just trade-offs non-stop because it's either individual outplays or just the team game is just so... they're all such definitely on the same page that when they're cross-mapping top for a tier 1 and you're getting their bot tier 1, they're not going to die on a side lane. They're not going to let their top laner die. Instead of sitting on their tower and getting dove, he's already farming your jungle camps. They're always like proactively thinking, what's the next step? How do we make sure that we're staying even in this game? And then eventually the next step is a fight. And when that fight happens, it's just, yeah, everyone plays it almost to perfection in the fights. And that's why the game is such a different level to watch, because it's never a snooze fest. Of course, it has weight behind the game as well. When you see Showmaker versus Chovy, you see they both have 130 CS at 10 minutes as well, and you're like, wow, this is next level.
And it is important to remember that we're not saying that this is the LCK as a whole, because there are some snooze fest games in the LCK. There are some teams that don't have that same, they aren't dancing, they're just waiting, and not every region is composed of teams that are like that, but the top of the LCK, it feels like that. And the top of the LPL, while often much more scrappy, can still feel like that and will still feel like that.
LPL is another beast to watch. Like the thing with the LPL is, I was just taking LCK as example. You watch the LPL, they will not. Everyone's flash will be down by 7 minutes. Like they will flash on you in that same phase. You are dying.
It's like honestly, like the LCK feels like Tai Chi. It's like smooth and flowing. I just watched the Shangxi and like the 10 rings, right? And so it just feels like that, like the smooth flowing, and like LPL just feels like Krav Maga. Like these guys are just actually murdering each other. Yeah, like both are martial. There's both martial arts. They're both beautiful in their own way, but one of them is exceptionally brutal, and one of them feels like more artistic and more like appreciable from a. Like a
I think a good example is like LCK. I talked about the dance and the cross map and the trades and like just going to the other side of the map. LPL is like, imagine a bot lane. Your support flashes in a set and dies level 1, and they get a first blood. But both of them use flash in bot lane. Then you tell your jungler, it was actually a good play because both have no flash. Let's just stack a wave bot and dive them, or let's just let the wave bounce into us and dive them. So they use, like, they practically think ahead of, like, I'm going to either make a play here that's bad to make a good play later on, or I'm going to force the play here to see what happens and then make sure my team's around to react. And that's how the LPL works. They think like, I will fight you here, and if you do not fight me back, you're going to lose. And if you fight me back, you're probably going to lose anyway. Yeah. But if you don't fight me back, you're definitely going to lose, right?
I think the way that I think about it is like LPL is a good death league. Like there is such thing as a good death in the LPL. In the LCK, there is too, but not to the same degree. Like there are a lot of good deaths in the LPL in the eyes of teams.
It's so exciting. You get to see it from just the junglers. They're level 5 walking into your red buff, and it shouldn't work. But if you say like, oh, he's on my red, I'm going to back off, and you go to the other side of the map, you've lost the play. You have to fight him to stop him getting it. And if you don't fight him, he's going to take it in your face. And you need to have the balls to say, get out of my jungle and fight him back. Get the hell out of this bot lane. You're not allowed to lane 2v1. Stop staying on that tower and catching this wave. LPL is just going to throw a punch at you. And if you don't block it, it's going to hit you right in the face, right? That's what the beauty of LPL is.
Absolutely. Of course, that was a bit of a tangent away from the LEC, but exciting leagues to watch. Certainly, if you didn't watch you should be sure to watch the Genji Dalmon series from last week. It was a super banger. And also, if you missed any LEC, be sure to watch the SK Mad Lions game, both because of the Caedrel solo cast and because I just honestly thought it was a super fun game this weekend. Just to wrap up here, we're going to hope that the LEC will continue to grow. If you're an LEC fan and you're worried about international, just know that we're not there yet, and our teams have a ton of time to get better and to improve. And this was a hugely rocky offseason in terms of changes. So it is totally okay for the LEC to come in at a little bit of a lower level. Believe in the growth. I personally am optimistic that we can get back to the highs of 2019. And maybe if it's not a single super team, which right now, like maybe it could be Fnatic, hopefully we can get a bunch of good teams together. But that is a far, far way away.
I think the last point I would make is we've described LEC, LCK and LPL as LCK as the dance, LPL as the fist fight. LEC, I feel like they found international success with just creativity and innovation, like being one step ahead of the meta in drafts, being one step ahead in plays, which are not very common. So I think that kind of flavor that the LEC and the flair they brought in 2019, G2 specifically, all just came from just creativity and willing to just think outside the box. And I think that's where Europe has really found success. So maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll get it again this year.
Get weird with it, LEC teams. That's what we're saying. Get weird with it. Get your wins on the board with your scaling comps, and then just get weird. Do weird stuff. Watch the LEC this weekend, Friday and Saturday. Caedrel and I will be casting together, hopefully in studio together. Joyous reunion that can be. Fingers crossed. We'll figure out the fine details later in the week, and we'll keep you guys posted. One last thing before we close and end of the last episode. There's a question that I've been thinking about. Alphari is a super historic player, and this is going to feel like a loaded question, and it kind of is, but it's something that I think we're going to talk about next week. So I don't want any answers now, but I want to pose it to all the Euphoria audience just to think about, and we'll come prepared to talk about it next week. And feel free to tweet us. Feel free to tweet if you're going to tweet at LEC. Use the hashtag Euphoria so we can track it, or just tweet at us directly at Daniel Dracos and at Caedrel. Let me see exactly how I phrase this. Is Alphari a good carry top laner? That's the question. Not is he good at playing carry champions? Is he a man who from the top lane can carry games? That's the question that I want people to think about. I'm not going to lead you in any particular way. Obviously, it was a rough week for Vitality, so maybe there's going to be more people on the negative side of the coin. But if you want to engage with us about this, be sure to bring some evidence. Be like, hey, how about this game? How about this series? That would be great, because that's what I'm going to be doing this week. It's something I'm thinking about a lot, because obviously he is a very strong laner.
I've seen this opinion float around while he was in the LCS and in TL, and I'll hold my hands up and say I didn't watch a lot of the TL. I wouldn't watch a lot of the LCS in general just because of the time zone and like working on the LEC and LPL, LCK things. So yeah, I think that what you just said there about evidence would be awesome. Like if someone can bring up a game and just be like, hey, he had this lead and then he did these mistakes over and over again and he did it again this week and this week, then that would be great. But I think that's a cool question for food for thought, because I think that's an opinion that's been kind of floating around the league scene over the last, I'll say, year in general. And just around Alphari as a player.
And I'm not trying to lead anyone in any particular direction. I think it's an interesting discussion, especially as we've built up Alphari a lot as a player, and I think that he has some pretty clear strengths, and it would be good to just look at him a little bit more deeply. Next week, we'll also probably look to bring in a guest for interviews. Hopefully, we'll be back in the studio as well. My boy Mickey is turbo chilling, so Mickey may end up being a regular guest on the show. If you're excited for Mickey, let us know. Can't 100% commit to that yet because I haven't talked to him about it or signed him up yet. But I'm soft.
So you just peer pressuring him into doing it now by just saying it on the show.
I'm low-key peer pressuring Mickey X to come into the show. Maybe he can help us rate some bot lanes. But this has been episode 2. I titled this episode NA Exports Keck W. I don't know if that title will make it in, so I thought I'd share it one time here. This has been Euphoria Podcast, episode 2. Hopefully back in studio next week. Watch the LEC this weekend, and eventually we will beat the LCK and the LPL. I promise, LEC fans, it will happen. Until next time, see you later.